All right, so this is how to write an outstanding historical essay and also how to write an LEQ for the AP Euro exam or for any of your AP history exams for that matter. So the ability to write a good historical essay is not only critical in order to do well in AP Euro, but it's a vital skill that will help you improve your writing for other high school classes and for college level work. Historical essays often ask you to agree or disagree with an interpretation of history, require you to develop your own interpretation and support it with evidence, or debate historical concepts and themes. These are all the types of questions that you'll get from the College Board. LEQ on the AP exam is part 2 of the exam, along with the DBQ. There'll be 3 similar questions to choose from. One will be period 1. One will be from periods 2 to 3, and one from periods 3 to 4. And you pick one of those questions, obviously, whichever one you know best. You will plan for 5 minutes and write for 35 minutes, and then this accounts for 15% of your total score, the smallest amount of any of them, and actually what I believe is the hardest, because there's no documents. This isn't a DBQ. There's no stimulus to look back on. There's no anything. It's just your brain and the question. And so there's much less to this one because it's just, do you know the stuff? Okay, so we're going to approach this the same way we approach the DBQ. And we're going to look at what to do in your pre-writing, what to do in actually writing the essay, and then what to make sure you include in your body paragraphs and everything. So pre-writing is 5 minutes. Take those 5 minutes. Use those 5 minutes. Fully use those 5 minutes. You will be glad that you did. So carefully read the question. Make sure you understand what it's asking. Once again, the biggest mistake is not answering the question that's asked, answering the question you feel like answering. Make sure you figure out the thing you need to write about. What is it asking you about? What should this essay be about? Make sure you're looking at what historical thinking skill they're using, causation, comparison, or continuity and change over time, because that's going to shape how you put your essay together. Also, make sure you know the chronology and location of the question. Make sure you know what they're asking, when they're asking, and where it is. So one of the first things you should do is develop your contextualization. This is the same thing that you do for DBQ contextualization. You're putting it in a bigger context. You're putting it in the big picture, the chapter of the book that it's in. This is the previously on Game of Thrones, or whatever show people watch these days, I don't know. Previously on The Mandalorian, it sets the scene. Take a few minutes to review what you already know about the question. Make a list of evidence you can use, a list of specifics. Anything you know about it, just make that list. Start putting it down. Start getting it there. That's why we actually do the contextualization first on this one, or at least the idea of it, because that kind of helps prime your brain for what you know about this. You pull up the file on this, and okay, what do I know? Just pour it all out there in 5 minutes. Then you are going to organize your evidence into logical categories that you can write an essay around. So it's almost like you're grouping, but there's no documents to group. You're grouping your own ideas together. Then you have to develop an explicit thesis statement. It has to explicitly and specifically answer the question. You could never just say there were political, religious, and social causes. Well, of course there is. There's those causes to almost anything that we would write about. So, all right. So to write the essay, you're going to take 30 minutes to do this, 30 to 35. We'll talk about that more as we get there. So the introduction, this is where you make your first impression on the reader. You start with your contextualization once again. Once again, you're starting out broad on this and bringing it into your thesis. Just do me a favor and never begin your essay with the words throughout history. It's just the lamest, weakest thing, and you can do better than that. Contextualization should be about 4 to 5 sentences, including your linking sentence. And so I just don't think it's very possible to do it or to do it well in less than that. Next comes your thesis. So again, you're starting broad, contextualization, getting it down to your thesis. Your essay should be clearly organized around your thesis statement. When I read your thesis, I should know exactly the direction your essay is going to go. Thesis statement should respond to all parts of the question without directly repeating it. You should make a clear argument. So if it asks you for the most significant or the most important, or was it more religious or political, make your argument. Also make sure that you're using the historical reasoning skill, the historical thinking skill to frame your thesis. And it should be the last sentence in your introduction. And I really believe it can be only one sentence. It should only be one sentence. When we get to your conclusion, you're going to restate your thesis. And I say that carefully, restate, not rewrite, because chances are, after you've been writing about this for 30 minutes, you probably know what you were trying to say better than you did when you started it. And so if you reword your thesis and say it better in the conclusion, that's awesome. So restate it and say it better. And then just as it said, after reading the intro, the reader should know exactly what your argument is, how it's historically situated, how you're going to prove it, and how the essay is organized. Paragraph by paragraph, my thesis should say X, Y, and Z, then my paragraphs are X, Y, and Z. This was the most significant, but this was other causes. Okay, then I should be able to see that. The reader should see that very clearly. Yeah, absolutely. Make it so. All right. So for the body paragraphs, I would say in most of our LEQs, 3 supporting paragraphs are the norm. It's kind of the traditional introduction, 3 body paragraph, conclusion, essay. But depending on the question and how you're organizing your answer, you could have 2, you could have 4. I'd say 2 is a lot more common than 4. But you need to have 1 paragraph for each of your supporting arguments in your thesis. Each paragraph must begin with a clear topic sentence that introduces the topic of the paragraph. Each topic must relate directly back to the question in your thesis. The topic sentence is so important because it lets the reader know the direction this paragraph is going to go. If your thesis says the most significant causes of this were X, Y, and Z, the first sentence of your first body paragraph should be one significant cause of this was X. It might not be the prettiest, it might not win you prizes with your lit teacher, but it makes it easier for the reader to read it. In the body of the paragraph, give specific and accurate evidence that supports your topic. Be as precise as possible. Mention events, people, publications, ideas, and describe them. Use your evidence to support your thesis, to support your argument. Your argument is only as strong as the evidence you use to support it. You can't just say something was significant. You have to show how it was significant, why it was significant. You need specifics in there to do that. Use the historical reasoning skill, whether it's comparison, causation, continuity, and change over time. And use those terms frequently. One cause of this, another way to compare these 2 items. These are different in that this states similar, but this changed. Use those terms in your essay. Within your paragraphs, define important terms if you need to. Humanism, secular, absolutism, to show that you know these terms. If you're using it correctly and you're using it in context, that'll show. But even something as simple as humanism, a new secular way of looking at the world, something like that, can help strengthen your essay because it shows the reader that you know what the heck you are talking about. Some logistics here. I'm on number 6. Use your most convincing essay point in your first body paragraph. Whatever you think is your strongest evidence, use that first. Always lead with your strongest argument. You won't lose points for minor historical errors. If you mean to write 1898 and you write 1998 and everything else is fine, they're going to know that you screwed it, like you messed it up. You knew what you were talking about. You just wrote the wrong thing. Same with minor spelling errors and stuff like that, as long as it doesn't detract from the argument. Never use the following words in your essay or any academic essay. I, you, we, stuff, things, huge. You sound unintelligent. Don't do it. So complex understanding is once again part of this essay, same as it is in the DBQ. And it's the exact same thing. You are going beyond the question. You are taking it to the next step. So 4 different ways you can do that. You can do connections, which is drawing connections to other time periods. This is similar. It happened also in this era, and you have to draw direct comparisons. Both, again, same as the DBQ. This is really the big one that the College Board is really leaning towards here. If it asks for causes, you can do effects. If it says, was this more religious or political? You say it was mostly political, but here it also was religious. It was primarily political, but here's some evidence of religion. So that's the big one. Qualify, you're saying the whole question is wrong. Historiography can be very useful with this. If you're thinking of our views of the Renaissance project, one way that you can look at that is if the question asks, why did the Renaissance start in Italy? You can go make your full argument why the Renaissance started in Italy and say, but actually, the Renaissance really was more of a long transition out of the medieval, and Charles Homer Haskins said 12th century Carolinian friends and blah, 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 and the reader will just be like, oh my gosh, this student is so incredibly lucky to have such a great teacher to tell them all these wonderful things. And then thematic, bringing in another theme. If the question is all about the politics, and you can bring in economic points of view. If it's economic and political, you can bring in religious issues here too. And then once again, we still can use the College Board QD to help us remember that. And then lastly, the conclusion. So start by restating your thesis. I said this at the beginning. Don't copy it word for word. You probably know it better now. So start by restating your thesis. So you're starting real specific and restate your thesis, and then back yourself out of the essay. You can kind of do a little reverse contextualization there. Sometimes your complex understanding ends up in your conclusion, but not as often in the LEQ, I generally find, unless you're doing the connections and are making that a whole paragraph, or the qualify for that matter. But just wrap it up. And then the one way I really like to think about the LEQ is it's similar to a lawyer presenting a case in court. You need to have a clear position of what you're trying to prove, and you need to have specific, accurate, and convincing evidence to prove it. I attached a rubric here. It's just, once again, kind of a generic rubric, and whenever we do specific LEQs, I will have specific parts in here included with what you need for this particular LEQ. But I think that's all we need to talk about today. So hopefully the sound worked this time, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.